Explosive new footage has taken over the internet, revealing a brutally aggressive and heavily debated defensive approach used against the Indiana Fever, while Sophie Cunningham completely shifted the narrative and ignited social media in the process. During this weekend's highly anticipated preseason clash between the Indiana Fever and the New York Liberty at the Barclays Center, the mainstream broadcast missed much of the real intensity unfolding on the court, quickly moving past controversial sequences, downplaying the physical nature of the matchup, and overlooking the constant defensive pressure being applied throughout the game. However, viral fan-recorded clips combined with the undeniable toughness of Indiana Fever's key enforcer have now sparked widespread discussion across the WNBA community. Sophie Cunningham didn't just trend for her shooting. She went viral for turning the floor into her own controlled space, aggressively blocking lanes, sealing defenders, and physically carving out room for Caitlin Clark whenever pressure closed in. Even Brianna Stewart, the Liberty superstar, was confronted with the reality of just how physically imposing this new-look Fever team has become. In the middle of all this attention stands a deeper breakdown of Cunningham's impact, the Liberty's defensive approach, and the growing identity of Indiana as a fearless, physical contender, all fueled by raw, unfiltered footage that mainstream coverage largely failed to fully acknowledge.
Hey, real quick, let me kill this sound because it got copyright music. You guys see that? Did y'all? And now she's throwing up her hands. She's throwing up her hands like she ain't just damn me. Boom. Lead forward and assault Sophie Cunningham, bro. Dirty fucking play there. That was a dirty play. Now, it looked like the referee actually might called it.
Long before Sophie Cunningham began her relentless run of defensive disruption, she was already at the center of a highly debated physical sequence involving former MVP Brianna Stewart. In the raw fan footage, Cunningham is seen navigating the perimeter when Stewart steps directly into her path, setting up what initially looks like standard off-ball contact. But the situation quickly becomes controversial as Stewart appears to shift her body forward rather than maintaining a controlled screen, creating sudden and forceful contact in Cunningham's chest area that immediately caught attention in real time. The intensity and timing of the collision sparked instant debate, especially given how impactful it looked from multiple angles. What escalated the discussion even further was Stewart's immediate reaction, raising both hands and turning toward the official as if signaling innocence or an accidental play. That split-second response has since fueled ongoing arguments among fans and analysts, with opinions divided between those who see it as physical but legal basketball positioning and others who believe it crossed into overly aggressive and potentially unsafe contact.
So this is a slow motion version of it. So as you guys can see here, just look at it. Boom, bro. Boom. Just completely look at Brianna Stewart's face. And this is who we got in charge of negotiating the CBAs. Look at this. Like, how do something like this happens always?
When you slow the sequence down frame by frame, the biomechanics are what fuel the entire debate around the play. Stewart is still in motion beyond the three-point line, and rather than planting and holding position, her momentum carries forward into the contact point, creating a sudden collision that immediately draws attention. Her arm extends slightly away from her body, which increases the physical impact and makes the moment look more forceful depending on the angle you view it from. For some fans, that interpretation pushes the play into questionable territory, while others see it as part of the natural edge and physical intensity of high-level competition. What stands out even more, however, is Sophie Cunningham's response after absorbing the contact from a taller and stronger opponent. She stays composed, doesn't appeal to the officials, and doesn't break focus. She absorbs the hit, regains balance almost instantly, and resets into the next phase of the play. That reaction highlights her understanding of the moment. The pressure wasn't just about one isolated screen or collision, but about sustained physical disruption aimed at breaking rhythm, with Indiana's transition threats and Caitlin Clark's presence at the center of how aggressively the defense was being played.
Talking about right here. So this was Sophie here. But watch how this girl is hacking Caitlin Clark. Watch this. Caitlin Clark is getting hacked. Watch. Watch. Look at her. Hacking Caitlin Clark all over. Now watch Sophie. Boom. Now, when Sophie did...
Taking a closer look at how the New York Liberty defended Caitlin Clark on the perimeter, the details point to a consistently physical approach. Defenders stayed attached through every dribble, crowding her space early, applying tight on-ball pressure, and making each initiation of the half-court offense feel contested before it could fully begin. The intent was clear in execution: disrupt timing, limit rhythm, and force Clark into uncomfortable reads under constant pressure. Across multiple possessions, that level of contact created a visibly demanding environment for a primary ball handler trying to set the tone. That is where Sophie Cunningham's presence began to reshape the dynamic. The footage captures her stepping into a defined role with clear physical purpose, delivering firm, well-timed screens that shifted defenders off their lines and created immediate separation for Clark. Rather than passive off-ball movement, her actions were assertive and controlled, designed to interrupt defensive positioning and relieve pressure at the point of attack. In response to the Liberty's perimeter intensity, Cunningham provided a counterweight through strength, timing, and physical discipline, turning screening actions into a form of resistance that altered how the defense could sustain its approach across possessions.
Sophie didn't look like she leaned into her, bro. Let me see. Nope. I don't think she did. I don't think. Oh, and old girl flopped. Look at this damn flop. She threw her arms up and everything. Now, we go back and look at what happened to Sophie. Like, people want to say Sophie did the same thing.
One defining sequence from that game quickly took over social media and became one of the most replayed moments of the night. As Caitlin Clark drove into the lane with full pace, the defense collapsed from multiple angles, stacking pressure in the paint and forcing her into a tightly contested finish window. In that split-second congestion, Sophie Cunningham rotated into position and delivered a firm, well-timed screen that changed the geometry of the possession. It wasn't just a brief pick, it was a committed, physical seal that placed her body directly between Clark and the recovering defender, creating clean separation at a critical moment. The collision that followed drew immediate reaction, with the defender's exaggerated response adding another layer to the debate and pushing the clip into wider circulation. What made the sequence stand out even more was the contrast in how physicality was handled throughout the game. Cunningham consistently absorbed contact without overreacting, staying balanced, composed, and locked into the next action rather than seeking stoppages or attention from officials. That steadiness became part of the broader discussion, as viewers compared different approaches to physical basketball, one focused on maintaining control through contact, the other leaning into reactions that might influence whistles. That contrast helped fuel the clip's reach across platforms, turning it into a broader conversation about toughness, positioning, and intent on the court. As the narrative expanded, some fans began framing Sophie Cunningham as Caitlin Clark's unofficial enforcer, especially after earlier physical sequences involving Stewart circulated and intensified scrutiny of the matchup. Whether or not that label is fair, the perception itself reflects a larger shift in how the Indiana Fever are being viewed. No longer a team that can be pushed around or disrupted without resistance, but one increasingly willing to match physical intensity with their own controlled force. Throughout the previous season, Caitlin Clark faced consistent physical pressure, tight on-ball coverage, frequent bumps on drives, and sustained contact designed to disrupt her rhythm and test her adjustment to the professional level. That constant nightly pressure contributed to the overall wear and strain of her rookie year, which ultimately ended after 13 games due to soft tissue issues that highlighted just how demanding the transition to the Wnba can be. Rather than isolated incidents, it reflected a broader pattern of physical intensity that she had to navigate every time she stepped on the floor. What shifted part of the conversation was the arrival of Sophie Cunningham as a steady physical presence alongside her. After a 9-month recovery from an MCL injury and a demanding rehabilitation process, she returned with renewed purpose and a clear on-court identity. Signing a 1-year deal worth $665,000, she came back not just as a rotational piece, but as a player tasked with absorbing contact, setting physical screens, and helping change how defenses approach Clark's possessions. In Saturday's game at Barclays Center, she reinforced that role with a composed performance, finishing efficiently with 13 points on 5 of 8 shooting and delivering a noticeable +8 impact that extended beyond the box score. Cunningham's style of play naturally sits near the edge of physical interpretation in the WNBA, particularly with how aggressively she sets screens and establishes position, which often leads to contested officiating decisions. Still, her presence introduces a tangible strategic shift. Opposing defenses are forced to think twice about overloading physical pressure on Clark when they know it may be met with immediate counter-physicality on the next possession. That enforcer effect, whether formal or informal, changes spacing, timing, and defensive intent in subtle but meaningful ways. After the win, Cunningham further extended her visibility by posting a viral TikTok, amplifying her impact beyond the game itself and feeding into the ongoing conversation about identity, toughness, and physicality in the league. In her New York hotel room afterward, she leaned fully into the moment, lip-syncing, celebrating, and embracing the spotlight in a way that reflected her personality as much as her performance. Flexing her surgically repaired knee with visible confidence and hyping the clip with dubs in the chat, she turned a simple post-game video into a viral social media moment that spread quickly across platforms. The TikTok resonated because it wasn't staged or overly polished. It felt like an extension of how she plays, direct, expressive, and unafraid of attention. From a broader perspective, the clip also reinforced why Sophie Cunningham's presence carries value beyond traditional box score production. Her energy, physical style, and willingness to embrace the emotional side of competition add a cultural layer to the Indiana Fever's identity that is harder to quantify, but easy to recognize. For a franchise building around visibility and momentum, that type of personality becomes part of the product itself. At the same time, that combination of toughness and charisma inevitably raises roster conversations. Players who bring both on-court utility and off-court engagement tend to attract attention around the league, and it's natural for front offices to notice when someone fits multiple roles at once. For Indiana, that makes her development and role security more than just a short-term consideration. It becomes part of how they define continuity within the group. In that sense, her value isn't just about one season or one deal, but how she fits into the team's evolving identity moving forward. Every single team on the Indiana Fever's demanding schedule is going to feel Sophie Cunningham's presence in a very real and unavoidable way this season, because she isn't simply returning. She's returning with a sharper edge, a more defined physical identity, and an intensity that immediately changes how possessions unfold. Her addition reshapes Indiana's structure, particularly in how they absorb contact, manage spacing, and handle perimeter pressure, since opponents can no longer overload Caitlin Clark without paying attention to the next layer of resistance behind her. With Cunningham anchoring the physical side of the game, Clark benefits from a more stable offensive environment, where defenders are less willing to overcommit or crowd her space without consequence. Beyond what happens on the court, there is also a clear cultural shift taking shape within the roster. A huge shout-out goes to loyal channel members like Sarah, Mark, and David for consistently supporting this platform and pushing for elite, uncompromising tactical breakdowns that focus on the real mechanics of basketball rather than surface-level narratives. That kind of backing makes it possible to dive deeper into the game, into screens, rotations, physical matchups, and the subtle details that actually decide possessions. If you connect with that more physical, enforcer-driven style of basketball analysis, make sure to subscribe, because this season is set to be defined by identity battles, matchup pressure, and possession-by-possession intensity across the league. And if you want the most detailed roster insights anywhere online, take it a step further and drop your completely unfiltered predictions in the comments, breaking down not just what you think will happen next, but which Sophie Cunningham physical tone-setting moment has genuinely defined this stretch of games for you so far. Because the conversation around her role is starting to evolve in real time in a way that feels increasingly important to how this Indiana Fever roster is being shaped. There is a growing layer of intrigue around whether she continues operating primarily as that aggressive, physical stabilizer who sets the edge on defense and creates space through sheer presence, or whether her role naturally expands into something more complete, where she contributes consistently on both ends of the floor, while still maintaining that same edge that changes the energy of possessions. Every game seems to add a new detail to that evaluation, whether it's a key screen, a defensive rotation, or a moment where her physicality shifts momentum in Indiana's favor. And that accumulation is what makes this storyline worth tracking closely as the season develops. Make sure you turn on the notification bell immediately, because the upcoming preseason matchup on April 30th against the Dallas Wings is approaching fast, and every possession, adjustment, matchup decision, and physical battle will be broken down in full detail as this evolving narrative continues to unfold in real time.